I just grew up hearing these horror stories of residential school, of what my grandmother and my grandfather both went through. My mother, who went to the reserve school, but the same teachers that taught at the residential school taught at the reserve school. The only thing is they went home after. Being that they went through residential school and they had horrible experiences there, when they came out, they had no real life skills. Their coping mechanism, like a lot of First Nations people, was alcohol. And my mother grew up really with a tough upbringing. My grandpa was known for being one of the worst drunks on the 3 reserves that were connected to each other. It was just a really horrible time. The thing is, my grandpa, he once told my mom, he said sorry to them. He went to treatment and he cleaned up his life, and none of his grandkids had ever seen him touch a single drop of alcohol. He may not have been the greatest father, but he was an amazing grandfather.
I was raised off reserve. For years in my life, it was just complete identity crisis. I think that there was even a point that I didn't even know I was Native. Residential school wasn't even talked about, and those 2 words were bad words. And then because of religion and because of fear that was instilled in the residential school, there was no history being taught. I see pictures of my grandmother, at my parents' wedding, and her makeup is like a mime. It's white. That's how bad she wanted to be white. There's a lot of shame when your own grandmother and your family has said to you, don't be an Indian, move away from here. And so, being a part of any sort of ceremonies or culture or even any teaching, it just wasn't there. Now I'm just so hungry, and an experience like this where we're traveling all over the place and we're connecting with this deep history. This is so rich.
It's interesting to hear your stories. It reminds me part of our history in Squamish when we had a great flood, and it was a huge hardship, just like residential school, just like colonization. Far back in our history, we could only take our most prized possessions. Going through those processes, we only had those quick moments to go, this is what we need to take and preserve and pass down to our next generations. And really, I think that's what my parents did too. We moved back to the reserve when I was about 12 years old. And that was my first exposure.
That must have been a strange experience.
It was a different world, really. But it really hit me. My grandpa was elderly man. We would go from our reserve at Stotmas and walk into town. And along that trail, we could see various important places that he always pointed out to me. This is this is that. This is why you should know. I start sharing that with my family, and they said, he never did that with anyone else. He passed that on to you.
And look at what you're doing now.
And
passing that on.
And what I'm doing now is passing that on through teaching, but also bringing that back to the community. And that's the really important thing for me. Our resilience over the last 500 plus years is now turning into revitalization. The future is bright.
It is.
Yeah.